The grey cylinder structure takes a new turn at Massey's. The flame bucket nears completion at Sanchez. Flight 8 vehicles roll out at the build site, and rebar for the flame trench for Pad B at the launch site as SpaceX also prepares for the upcoming Flight 8 of Starship Super Heavy. Welcome to episode 74 of Starbase Flyover Update. We'll cover all the Starbase development from the 8th of February through to the 24th. My name is Jeff A, and I'll be your guide for this episode, so let's buckle up and enjoy the latest flight from 10,500 feet. We'll start our tour over at the Massey's test facility. Before we dive in, let's have a quick look at the labelled map by Proky to get you oriented. Let's begin at the structural test stand, shall we? Beginning at the bottom of the stand, the honeycomb base has been finally filled with concrete. Moving to the rams, the new triangular pieces that were spotted in a previous flyover have been installed over the top of the pistons. At the booster cryo stand, we can see the steel pancake structure has been flipped over and relocated here, and some interesting new additions have been made. Concrete fill and 4 new structures have been added to the circular section, as well as reinforcement in between. The lids for these new additions can be seen near the ship's cryo area. They also have holes for more of the concrete fill. If you look closely, there are mounting points that are the same as the booster cryo stand over at Sanchez. All these observations lead us to believe that this is the beginning of a new version of a booster cryo stand. If you look at this old archive photo of the current stand when it was under construction, the centre ring for mounting the hydraulic actuators looks a lot like the ring behind the new structural test stand. Now let's take a look at Rio West. Beginning with the apartment complexes to the west of the site, some of the parking garage floor slabs have been poured, with more forms for walls starting to go up. Piles for the living quarters section can be seen throughout the area, with more currently being prepared with the red and white unit. Moving to the eastern apartment complex, the first buildings are starting to receive a roof, and the others have had their main structure completed, with the buildings below starting to rise. The houses at the bottom of the site are progressing well, with some starting to be prepared to receive their concrete second floor. The first one is nearly ready to pour in this picture. Finally, additional foundations for more houses are being prepared at the top and bottom of the right side of the site. And now, on to Sanchez. Taking a glance at the OLM build area, there's not much visually changed from last week. But at the flame bucket area, the pipes that were installed on each half are now being welded together as expected. There are 13 pipes still to be fitted. Another thing to note is that the ridge cap for the flame bucket is moved. It's probably having its skin welded on in preparation for final installation into the system. The new pipe racks that were set up recently are being used for pipe storage. This will add some orders around the site. The third subcooler that was around this area was moved to the launch site for installation into the new tank farm expansion for Pad B, but more on that later. Going closer to Highway 4, the booster transport stand that has been sitting here for months now has been fully packed with scaffolding ahead of completion. Moving to the left, one of the Star Factory jigs went into the factory, with the 6-sided jig under a white tent getting painted. The load spreader used to load test the chopsticks has made a return to Starbase and should soon be used to commission the new Pad B tower catch arms. At the scrapyard, some sections of Ship 32 are being actively scrapped. Rest in peace, Ship 32. Finally, at the parking garage, the mural is being replaced with a white wall, aligning with the black and white style of SpaceX. With that, let's move to the build site. Welcome to the build site, where SpaceX is putting the finishing touches on the recently constructed buildings and preparing new vehicles for flight. Starting off at Mega Bay 2, we saw Ship 36's forward dome section rolled into the bay ahead of stacking on its nose cone. This was followed by the common dome section on the 24th of February. Interestingly, these latest 2-barrel sections were stacked with no heat shield tiles. Now moving on to Ship 34, which is the Flight 8 upper stage. After having its flight termination system installed in Mega Bay 2 on the 23rd, it's due to be loaded onto its transport stand and have Starlink simulators loaded before its rollout to the launch site for stacking on Booster 15. Now moving on to Mega Bay 1, you can see Booster 15 staged for rollout, but more on that later. Starbase Surfer captured this heartwarming image of the technicians who worked on the booster. While there were no notable changes with Booster 16, which is still preparing for its cryo test, we did see Booster 17's F4 section being rolled into Mega Bay 1 for stacking. This is the last barrel section needed for this latest Block 1 booster. Please refer to this diagram by the Ring Watchers. In a close-up by Starship Gazer, you can see this barrel section is destined to be a test article for the Booster 18 build. This is possible evidence that it is to be the first Block 2 booster. Sliding to the high bay, we can spot the remains of Ship 32, the last Block 1 starship, which ultimately ended up getting passed over in favour of Ship 33, the first of the newer Block 2 variants. Now looking at the entrance to the build site, we see crews cutting out small squares of concrete. Later, a vac truck excavated the holes and a series of manual bollards were installed. This comes after a number of trespassing incidents. In this clip by Lab Padre that went viral in the space community shows a security guard running to stop a trespassing car. Needless to say, this guy must be relieved to see a new row of bollards guarding the premises. Over to the front of the office building, a wall has been constructed along Highway 4 and St. Martin Boulevard, enclosing the newly seeded lawn area. The other new lawn area along Highway 4 has been seeded and covered with a mulching product. At the office building's connection to Star Factory, the sidings on the walls surrounding the ring yard have been completed. All the concrete in this area has also been laid. On the roof of the office building, the newly installed roofing is being weighed down by these construction materials. Now for a quick stop by the village. New areas are being prepared for turf and temporary trailers to house contractors working at Starbase. To the north, we can see other trailers for the same purpose. The apartment complex has more timber framing, with the new block being readied for its concrete foundations. Concrete has been poured at the recreation area, specifically around the pool. Now let's move to the launch site, where SpaceX is getting ready for Flight 8. But before moving on, this flyover was made possible by our paid supporters on Patreon. Consider supporting us to gain access to high-quality photo galleries and roundtable discussion the same day we fly. Before we dive into the launch site images, let's visit some recent updates from SpaceX released on February 24th, ahead of Flight 8 scheduled for no earlier than March 3rd. The FAA released the launch license for Flight 8 on February 27th, with some updates that are stepping stones for future orbital flight tests. The 28th would also see a statement authorising the return flight, while the Flight 7 mishap investigation remains open. As reported in our episode following Flight 7, Booster 14 succeeded in all phases of its flight. The only issue observed was during the boost back burn, when only 12 of the inner 13 engines lit. It was also reported that the reason that the engine failed to light was related to a low power condition in the igniter and consequently safely aborted startup. This criteria would be green for the landing burn, as all 13 successfully lit for that phase. A few more details were released regarding the problems for Ship 33. Approximately 2 minutes into the ship engine burn, a flash was observed in the aft of the vehicle near one of the Raptor vacuum engines. Sensors in the unpressurized area of the aft between the heat shield and the LOX tank detected a pressure increase likely due to a leak in the area. After another 2 minutes, a second flash was observed, followed by a controlled shutdown of 5 of the 6 Raptor engines. Due to fires in the aft, communication was lost around 8 minutes and 20 seconds into flight, and the autonomous flight safety system would ultimately be used to terminate the flight within expectations, and all debris remained inside the pre-planned debris response area. Flight 8 is up next, with a flight plan that is nearly identical to Flight 7. The ship will undertake a payload deployment test with only 4 Starlink simulators. 10 was the number planned for the previous flight. An in-space relight test, assorted tile tests, and non-structural catch pins will all be part of Flight 8. With launch information covered, here is this week's labelled map of the launch site. At the time of writing, Booster 15 was already on the OLM with its hot staging ring installed. At the time of publishing, Ship 34 should also be stacked and ready for flight. At Pad B, the flame trench now has a very dense cage of rebar constructed. Some areas have more rebar than others, where the OLM and other heavy structures will be supported. Along the southern side of the trench, the gantry steel is being erected, with the main frames being pre-assembled on the ground for easier assembly. Zooming in, the main propellant pipes and returns are seen rising between the steel. Here's a render from Chrome Kiwi to give you an idea of how the pieces currently on site are fitting together. Make sure to give him a follow on X. The commodity culvert west of the fluids bunker is complete to the end of the first expansion loop. This will likely continue after the next launch, when the path can be closed off. New electrical vaults have been installed, utilising some of the conduit seen buried earlier in the Pad B construction. Moving to the east, the population of the Water Deluge farm is started. 2 of the larger tanks are in place with a third staged nearby and would be installed later that evening. The 4th large tank would also be transported and installed the following day. The first of the smaller tanks arrived in the early hours of the 26th. Along the culvert, concrete is prepared for under the tanks and the covers continue to be installed for further tank installation. Looking over at the port connector road area, 3 of the smaller water tanks for the next bank have been staged, with a 4th tank being transferred between trailers closer to the port. The concrete pad for the new electrical bunker has been poured, with the piers protruding from it. Next to the previously assembled nitrogen tanks for the deluge farm, another smaller version of this system is also being assembled just to the east. At the new pump farm, the first 2 pump systems are nearly complete, with pumps installed along with their motor heads. To the side, skids have been placed for the next 2 pumps that are yet to be installed. On pads prepared in recent weeks, new Hippo subcoolers have arrived and been installed. 2 are near the front of the farm, with 4 others farther back. The last of the large subcoolers that was in Sanchez has also been installed on its foundations. In the very back part of the pump farm, the 2 large vertical tanks stored at the port connector road have also been installed near the protection wall. That wall has also seen expansion, with formwork already being removed. The forms will be placed once more to continue this to the end of the trench prepared in the foundation slab. At the front of the tank farm, continued work on the electrical bunker is underway. This week, formwork is in place, with rebar being prepared to complete the pad. In front of the horizontal tanks, new pipe racks are being placed over the existing pipework. These may be used to install the methane supply pipes towards the Pad B systems. Pad A is being prepared for the arrival of Flight 8 vehicles. The OLM clamp arms are all retracted into the ring and the BQD is closed. At ground level, all the welding equipment and hardware for pad refurbishment has been removed from the area. The tower also received new cladding panels for further protection from the Raptor exhaust during the booster landing burn. In this clip from Lab Padre, Booster 15 and the hot staging ring were transported to the launch site ahead of lifting onto the OLM. SpaceX would release these drone clips of Booster 15 being lifted onto the OLM at sunrise on February 25th. Ship 34 is still being prepared in Megabay 2. Transport delays have been posted for Sunday, March 2nd for final rollout, pushing the limit to meet the announced launch window. At the writing of this episode, SpaceX is targeting no earlier than March 3rd, with the launch window opening at 5:30 PM Central Time. Well, that's it for episode 74 of Starbase Flyover Update. Thank you for choosing to fly with RGV aerial photography, and I hope you all enjoyed the flight. If you liked what you saw today, please subscribe for more episodes and content so you don't miss out on the new videos each week. I'm Jeff A, and we all look forward to catching up with you again in our next Flyover update from 10,500 feet.